So allow me to set the scene and we'll kind of put ourselves here. Jesus is by the sea. He has this great multitude of people that are coming to him. In fact, so much so he decides to get a little distance between him and the crowd, so he gets in a boat and he's just teaching parable after parable after parable. In fact, later on, Mark will say it's just a day full of parables. And so he's just sowing the seed, and the seed is falling on all kinds of different grounds, all kinds of different hearts, and different people are responding to him and his message. In fact, that's exactly what Jesus is explaining in this story. You'll notice there are two parts to our reading. There's the parable itself, the story, and then there's the explanation to his disciples. So let's, Mark chapter 4, verse 1, let's go ahead and read. It says, "And again he began to teach by the sea, and the great multitude was gathered to him, so that he got into a boat and sat in it on the sea. And the whole multitude was on the land facing the sea. And he taught them many things by parables. And he said to them in his teaching, Listen, behold, the sower went out to sow. And it happened as he sowed, that some seed fell by the wayside, and the birds of the air came and devoured it. And some fell on the stony ground, where it did not have much earth. And immediately it sprang up, because it had no depth of earth. But then when the sun was up, it was scorched, and because it had no root, it withered away. And some seed fell amongst the thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked it, and it yielded no crop. Another seed fell on the good ground, and yielded a crop that sprang up and increased and produced, some 30, some 60, and some 100. And he said to them, He who has ears to hear, let him hear. But when he was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parable. And he said to them, To you it has been given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those who are outside, all things must come in parables, so that seeing that they may see and not perceive, and hearing that they may hear and not understand, lest they should turn and their sins be forgiven them. And he said to them, Do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all the parables? The sower sows the word, and these are the ones by the wayside where the word is sown. And when they hear, Satan comes and immediately takes away the word that was sown in their hearts. These likewise are the ones who sown on the stony ground, who when they hear the word immediately receive it with gladness. And they have no root in themselves, and so endure only for a time. Afterwards, when tribulations, persecutions arise, for the word's sake, immediately they stumble. Now these are the ones sown amongst the thorns. They are the ones who hear the word, and the cares of the world, the deceitfulness of riches, and the desires for other things enter in, choke out the word, and it becomes unfruitful. But these are the ones sown on the good ground, those who hear the word, accept it, and bear fruit. Some 30, some 60, and some 100. So we have 4 different types of soils, which represents 4 different types of hearts, and explains why people respond differently to Jesus and his word, which is represented by the seed. And so we have the wayside soil, which is the hard packed down soil where nothing grows. It's the type of person that you try to talk to about the gospel and they want nothing to do with it. But then you have like the rocky soil, which is represented by this thin layer of soil with a rock underneath, where they receive the word so they become a Christian. And they spring up but they have no roots. So that when you get a little dry spell, it just kind of withers away. And so when persecutions arise or temptations and trials and discouragement and disappointments come, then the person just withers away. And so if that's us, then what we need to do is we need to dig a little deeper, get the rocks out, and spend more time in God's word. But then we have something like the thorny soil, where it receives the seed, the plant grows, but doesn't produce any fruit because it has to compete with for nutrients with the weeds. That's just somebody with too much competition in their life. And that competition doesn't even have to be sinful. It can be something like too much overtime or too much after-school activities. It's kind of like Martha. Martha, you were worried about too many things. But there was one thing that was necessary for her to sit at the feet of Jesus. She needed to give her time and attention to that. And finally, we have the good soil, which receives the seed and produces fruit. That's the reason why God plants his word in our hearts in the first place. He wants something to grow there. And so the question is, where do we find ourselves in this parable? Because we're all on the soil spectrum somewhere. And so I hope this is something that you can take with you today and you can use to kind of challenge yourself